Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon in some cases, or even good morning for some. My name is Daniel and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety birthday is the 17th of July, 2005, and I'm 16 years and 5 days sober. And for that, I am grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous, my home group. I've got two. I'm a greedy alcoholic. Is Rishton Thursday night meeting, which is near Blackburn, just north of Manchester in England. And also my online home group is Riga Friday night meeting, which takes place in Latvia. And with the limitation on time, if you don't mind, I'm going to skip all my drinking history. It's really diverse. Just to give you a little bit of background, though, I am half Italian, I'm half English, and I grew up in Blackburn in Lancashire. The first time I touched the drink at the age of 6, I automatically wanted another drink. You know, unfortunately, I was born with this illness. Some people become an alcoholic. I was born with an addictive nature to alcohol, and like we know, it has a progressive nature, and it did do in my life. You know, it progressed up until the point of I was living behind closed curtains. And basically I had just been made bankrupt for the figure of about £33,500, which in US dollars is around about 42,000, I think, at the current exchange rate. Racking up debts in terms of my drinking mainly. I'd had failed relationships. I'd had many failed employers, many failed jobs. I also have a psychiatric twist to my tale in the fact that I had 2 psychotic episodes, both at airports whilst I was abroad, both involved at being on aircraft. One of them was 2 months after September 11 and led to me doing something really, really stupid. So, but I was ill at the time, you know, and when I was questioned about it, I didn't admit that I had a problem with alcohol until I came to the beautiful place behind me, which is an island called Poros in Greece. It's just outside of Athens. I went to live there in 2005. I had a failed relationship with a girl in 2003 that I met when I was 14 years old, around about must have been 1989. I met this girl, and I've been going to the island, and I had a relationship with her in 2003, which failed because of my drinking. But I decided to go and live there in 2005, you know, burnt all my bridges and decided to go to Greece and drink like the Greeks did. And basically, I ended up buying a van and putting all my life's possessions into it and just heading over there like you do. And I used to drink in the pool bar every day with my friends, alcoholic friends, I would say. And one day I happened not to go down to the pool bar. I went into a scooter shop where they hired motorcycles to tourists, and some guys piled into the shop. So some of them looking a little bit rough. They were from London. When I say rough, I mean they were tattooed up, you know, they looked like drinkers. And I said to them, listen, guys, take it easy on the drink driving, because there was a bad accident the week before. And another guy says, one of the guys says, we don't drink, pal, you know, and then another guy starts jumping up and down. He doesn't believe us. He doesn't believe us that we don't drink. And I said, I believe you because my granddad's in Alcoholics Anonymous, and he has been for a very long time. My granddad was sober for 38 years at this point in my life, 8 years prior to when I was born. And all I knew that was my granddad went to meetings, he stayed sober, and he helped other people. He actually advertised his telephone number in the local press. And basically they said to me, we're in AA, and they were full of beans, you know. They was telling me that they'd been to a convention nearby. And then 2 days later, I used to go around the island off the back of a hangover on my scooter with a bottle of water. And I bumped into one of these guys around the same place where that picture is. And within about a minute of chitter chatter, I said to him, I think I might have a problem with the booze. Not I'm a raving lunatic alcoholic, which I was at that point in my life. And basically he 12-stepped me. He told me what his life was like, what happened, and what his life was like then. And he also spoke a little bit about his own concept of a higher power, which no one had ever spoken to me about, their own concept of God before, which really touched me. Now, he said to me, if you've got a problem with alcohol, get yourself into Alcoholics Anonymous. And he also said, if you do get sober, come back to this convention next year. Anyway, I didn't think my problem was that bad, you know, like you do. My drinking continued. They went back home. In fact, I saw them a couple of nights later. I was completely drunk out of my head. And in a nutshell, what happened was physically, I started to feel really ill. I ended up going to the clinician over on the mainland and saying again, repeating the same exercise, I think I've got a problem with alcohol. Or you know, and she said to me, the solution's simple. Why don't you just stop drinking? And I thought to myself, why don't I just stop? I'd had so many half-hearted attempts in my life saying, I'll never do that again. I'm gonna stop drinking today. Alcoholics National Anthem, but this time I was adamant I was gonna stop, and I lasted about a day and a half. I wasn't entirely honest with how much I was drinking. I was drinking higher levels by this point in my life, and I ended up going insane for the third time in my life, going into psychosis, which is like a really negative hallucination, thinking that the world's going to come to an end and all the rest of it. And it was whilst I was in psychiatric hospital in Athens that it gave me a chance to think about everything that had been happening in my life, all the problems that alcohol had been causing, the failed relationships, the failed jobs, the you know, everything. And I started to admit to myself more about my problems. Anyway, I came out of hospital. My dad lives in Italy in the summer. My dad suffered a heart attack a couple of days after I came out of hospital, and I felt completely powerless over his situation, completely powerless over my own, and I ended up breaking down and praying for help for the first time in my life and saying, please God, get me out of this situation. And the idea came into my head what that guy told me. If you've got a problem with alcohol, get yourself into Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I didn't know AA existed in Athens. It wouldn't have been possible for me to commute because I was living on an island. And it was just after the bombings in London, for those of you that remember them, in 2005. So everyone was saying, like, it's a big security alert, you can't go back now. But I had a spiritual awakening, you know, I had a complete change of sentiment. The area that I live in, England, right, must be the wettest part of England. England is notorious for being wet. Now, believe you me, I call my place Rainy Rishton because it is very rainy here. Ironically, it's not at the moment, but it was the last thing that I wanted to do, was to leave a beautiful island in Greece, to come back to Rainy Rishton to sort my ass out. But I had that spiritual awakening where I had that complete change of mindset. Anyway, I managed to call my mother. She ended up wiring some money to me. And in a nutshell, I ended up driving all the way from Greece back to Blackburn. As well as a 30-hour ferry journey. It took me 4.5 days. It was 1,536 miles precisely that I covered by road. This is the vehicle that I covered it on, if you can see that on the screen in front of you, just to give you an idea, with all that shit piled on top. And basically, I got to the Swiss border. They wouldn't even let me through Switzerland, so I had to drive over the Alps, which was horrendous. Anyway, I got back on the Thursday morning. I phoned my uncle up, who's also in the fellowship. He was 2.5 years sober, and I said, Uncle Mark, I think I'm alcoholic. Will you take me to a meeting? He said, are you sure you've got a problem? I said, I can't stop drinking. And he said, right, I'll take you to a meeting on Sunday. And I thought, for fuck's sake, I want to go now. I'm desperate. And for anyone that's new about here, I hope to God that you've got the same desperation as what I had, because since my first meeting, I have been able to remain sober, because I think, in all honesty, I was ready to stop. You know, I had enough. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. Anyway, I had my last drink on the Friday night and the Saturday night. And then on the Sunday, I booked an appointment with the doctor on the Monday to put my cards on the table with him. Luckily, I managed to get some medication to stop as well at the same time. And I went to my first meeting on Sunday, the 17th of July, 2005. And I had all these stereotypical views of AA. It's full of idiots. It's full of down and outs. It's full of misery. It's full of shit, but I'm still going to go because I'm that desperate, you know. And if they told me to stand on your head in the corner, I would have done that, because that's how desperate I were. Anyway, my first meeting was a little bit different to a normal first meeting. The format of that meeting was to share individually going around the room. And my uncle made the mistake of not telling them that it was my first meeting. So in the first half of the meeting, I got to see a real a real meeting. And then the second half, he was the first person to share. And he says, my name's Mark, I'm alcoholic. I brought my nephew here. It's his first meeting. And he got a bit of what we describe in English as a bollocking. He got a telling off by other members saying, Mark, why did you not tell us? But it was good for me because I got to see a real meeting and a newcomers meeting. And I got a lot of hope from that first meeting. I must admit, you know, I never knew that it was the first drink that did the damage, you know, all up until that point. I used to think it was the 10th or the 13th drink that finished me off. In my first 2 weeks of sobriety, I remember calling out in a meeting and saying, I don't know what my 30th birthday is going to be like because I was 4 months short of being 30. I don't know what my Christmas is going to be like. I can't visualize it. And somebody pulled me to one side after a meeting and said, listen, pal, just take your life a day at a time and everything will be all right. And you know what? I did do. And on my 30th birthday, I went to Dubai, of all places, because I thought there was no alcohol there. And I found out through another AA member that there was alcohol there because he dragged me up a nightclub. But I went up in a hot air balloon, which I would never have done unless I was drunk before, because I was fearful of heights, but I challenged myself and I did something that I'd like to remember. And then at Christmas time, I went to Latvia. And that's where the Latvian meeting comes in on the Friday, because I've been attending that meeting since December 2005, physically before COVID. I went on a blind date with a girl on the 26th of December 2005. And in a nutshell, she came over here to live in September 2006, and we're still together now. We've been engaged a long time, probably about 12 years, but we've got a 9.5-year-old son together. The 12-step recovery program has helped change my life immensely. I wish I'd have done it sooner, if I'm honest with you. I did it when I started learning about the 12 steps about 12 months sober. I started to fall out of that pink cloud. I started to feel all the emotions, the resentments, the fears, the guilt, all the rest of the shit. And I started to learn about it, but it wasn't until I was 3.5 years sober that I went through the 12 steps thoroughly, and I sorted a lot of shit out. You know, my worst resentment happened to be my biggest amend, you know, which was to my father's partner. And today I would describe her as being a grandparent to my son. I would describe her as being a stepmom to me. And this is someone who I wouldn't have spit on the grave before for something that she did to me. Ironically, she did something to me because I threatened to do something to my dad. And then the fear around having children, you know, went through the 12-step recovery program, made a decision to have a child. And, you know, I was fearful of all sorts of things, fearful of the financial implications, fearful of responsibility, fearful of time aspects. But, you know, I've managed to get rid of that thanks to the 12 steps. And those are just 2 examples of going through the 12-step recovery program and having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. I do try to carry the message to other alcoholics. I don't sponsor other people these days because I do a lot of work in terms of public information, not only in my own locality, but I help other areas of the world out. I help people out in America. In fact, I took a call just before this meeting from somebody in Texas who would like me to speak. And, you know, it's imperative to me that everybody out there across the world knows about this great fellowship, you know, because whilst we are anonymous at the level of press, radio and film, we're not invisible like some of our members like to think, you know. And I really, really enjoy carrying the message. And I'll just end on this. I think I've got 2 minutes left, have I? Yeah, am I okay for 2 minutes? Yeah. So the guy that told me about Alcoholics Anonymous, I tried to go back to the convention the following year, and unfortunately my granddad, who was in the fellowship, he died the week before, and I found him dead actually, and I thought I'm never going to get to see this guy. But anyway, I booked a trip the following year, 2 years after I'd met him, not knowing his name or who he was exactly, you know. And I went to the convention and I spoke in front of about 400 people. And I said, you know, my name's Daniel, alcoholic. Somebody in Poros 2 years ago told me about this great fellowship in 12 Step Me. I described him and said, does anyone know who he is? And someone came up to me and said, that guy you're talking about is here. And I got to meet him and say thanks. And today he's one of my best friends in recovery. Is a guy called Gino from South London. I won a massive competition in 2013 to watch soccer or football, as I like to call it. I got to take him as a way of saying thanks to the football game. And something very spiritual happened at that game, is that I met a celebrity who I'm going to show right quickly now. I think you might be able to see this on the screen. He's on the right-hand side of me. Gino's the guy with the sunglasses on. And basically, in a nutshell, that guy who was to the right of me saw a billboard poster that I put up a railway station in Manchester. And that was 4.5 years after I'd met him. And then 5 years, near enough to the day that that picture came out, as a reminder on Facebook, he launched a program called Drinkers Like Us, because he admitted that he had a problem with alcohol. Now, that's not my doing. That's my higher powers doing at the end of the day. But this fellowship is really, really, really special. And for those that are new around and finding it tough at this moment in time, please, stick in there. Don't pick up the first drink. Get yourself a sponsor. Get through the 12-step recovery program. Get yourself some service as well. Get in the middle of the boat. And honestly, give it your best fucking shot, because I swear to God, this is a life beyond your wildest dreams. I'll leave it there and let the other lady come in. Thanks for letting me share.